They say a single line of code can change the world, but nobody tells you it can also burn your life to the ground. 3 years ago, I was the ghost in the machine, a top-tier cybersecurity analyst who saw a truth I wasn't meant to survive. I lost everything: my team, my identity, my soul, in a heartbeat of digital betrayal. Now I'm just Gina, the waitress who blends into the peeling wallpaper of a 24-hour diner, serving caffeine to the lonely and the lost. I thought I was safe in my invisibility. I thought I had buried the genius that once made me a god behind a keyboard. But tonight, the world I fled has found its way to booth 7. Carlo Caruso, the tech visionary whose algorithms run the modern age, is sitting there, unaware that a digital execution squad is closing in. 30 of the most ruthless corporate sharks, hackers, and predatory lawyers are about to erase him from existence, turning this greasy spoon into a high-stakes battlefield. They think I'm just a girl with a coffee pot and a tired smile. They don't know that beneath this stained apron beats the heart of a whistleblower who has nothing left to lose. Before the sun rises, I will show them that you should never underestimate a woman who has already survived the end of her world. Tonight, the invisible waitress becomes the ultimate glitch in their perfect plan. Underscore the neon sign of Rosie's Diner hummed with a low, agonizing buzz that vibrated in the back of Gina's skull. It was 3:15 a.m., the hour of the hollow-eyed and the haunted. The smell of burnt coffee and industrial-grade floor cleaner was the only thing keeping her grounded. Gina wiped the counter for the 100th time, her movements mechanical, practiced, and utterly devoid of life. To anyone passing by, she was a fixture of the environment, exhausted, middle-aged before her time, and safely unremarkable. Her hands, once capable of dancing across a mechanical keyboard at 140 words per minute, were now red and chapped from dishwater. Every step she took felt like wading through wet cement. This was the ghost protocol she had chosen. After the Kandahar incident where her entire team was liquidated, because she found the back door in the Aegis software, she had scrubbed her digital footprint until it bled. She had become a shadow because shadows don't get hunted. In booth 7 sat the only reason she still felt a flicker of human connection: Carlo Caruso. He didn't know her, not really. To him, she was the woman who knew he liked his coffee blacker than a moonless night and his cherry pie cold. For 3 years, he had come here every Thursday. He was a titan of industry, a man who had built an empire on ethical AI and transparent data, a rare bird in a sky full of vultures. Gina watched him from the corner of her eye. He looked weary tonight. The lines around his eyes were deeper, his expensive suit jacket draped over the vinyl seat like a discarded skin. He was a billionaire, yet in this dim light, he looked as stranded as she was. The trauma of 3 years ago flickered in her mind like a corrupted video file. The sound of servers humming, the smell of ozone, the frantic typing of Malik, her mentor, as the screens turned red. "They're inside, Gina, run. Take the drive and run." She could still feel the phantom weight of that encrypted drive against her ribs. She had watched through a hidden camera feed as the auditors, the corporate hitmen, wiped her department's existence. Not with guns, but with keystrokes that froze bank accounts, deleted identities, and triggered accidental fires. She had survived by becoming nothing. The chime above the door didn't ring, but the air pressure in the diner shifted. Gina's internal alarm, honed by years of high-stakes espionage, shrieked. A man entered. Viktor Kozlov. He wasn't a soldier. He was worse. He was a corporate raider who specialized in hostile liquidations. Behind him, a stream of men and women in razor-sharp charcoal suits filed in. They didn't look like killers, but their briefcases held the power to ruin nations. 30 of them. They moved with surgical coordination, taking up positions at every exit, opening laptops, and unfolding portable signal boosters. The diner went silent. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to die under the weight of their presence. "Mr. Caruso," Victor said, his voice as cold and precise as a scalpel. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He placed a sleek silver tablet on the table in front of Carlo. "The board has reached a consensus. As of 30 seconds ago, your shares have been diluted. Your patents have been contested in 3 international jurisdictions. And your personal assets have been frozen pending an investigation to felony embezzlement. You are no longer the CEO of Caruso Tech. You are a man with a cold cup of coffee and a very long list of debts." Carlo didn't flinch, but Gina saw his hand tremble slightly under the table. This is a fabrication, Victor. A coordinated hack. You can't just seize $1 trillion entity in a diner at 3 in the morning. I can when I own the auditors, the servers, and the law. Victor smiled, a thin, predatory curve of the lips. We've spent months building the backdoors. Your entire life is digital, Carlo, and we just deleted the undo button. By the time the sun rises, the press will have the evidence of your crimes. You'll be in a federal holding cell, and Caruso Tech will be stripped for parts. Gina stood behind the counter, clutching a damp rag. One of Victor's associates, a young man with a headset, glanced at her and then looked away, dismissing her as a harmless piece of the scenery. They had deployed a blackout field, a localized jammer that cut off all cellular and Wi-Fi signals. They were in a digital vacuum. Carlo was trapped, his empire being dismantled by 30 people with high-speed connections and malicious intent. Gina felt a cold, familiar heat rising in her chest. The exhaustion that had defined her for 3 years began to peel away, revealing the razor-sharp intellect she had tried so hard to bury. She looked at the wires running from the diner's old POS system to the back office. She looked at the signal boosters the raiders had set up. She knew their architecture. She knew Victor's signature moves. She looked at Carlo. He was a good man being destroyed by the same darkness that had consumed her team. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not with fear, but with a long-dormant sense of justice. Assess. Act. Or die. Malik's voice echoed in her head. She wasn't going to let another good man be erased. Not on her watch. Not in her diner. Slowly, Gina backed into the kitchen, her hand reaching for the hidden compartment beneath the prep table, where she kept the one thing she could never bring herself to destroy, her custom-built, blackened aluminum terminal. The invisible waitress was about to go online. Victor Kozlov leaned back in the plastic chair, the stark fluorescent lights reflecting off his polished watch. He looked like a man watching a symphony, his 30 musicians tapping away at their keyboards, their screens glowing with the cascading data of Carlo Caruso's downfall. You see, Carlo, Victor whispered, the world isn't built on steel and concrete anymore. It's built on trust. And trust is just a variable that can be edited. By dawn, the NYSE won't even remember your name. Carlo sat motionless, his face a mask of stoic despair. He looked at his hands, the hands that had built an empire, now powerless against a storm of invisible bits and bytes. You'll never get away with this, he murmured, though even he sounded unconvinced. Who will stop us? The police? They're currently receiving anonymous tips about your offshore accounts. Your own board? They're signing the merger papers as we speak, terrified of being implicated in your scandal. Victor gestured to the room. We are the new law. Suddenly, the diner's flickering neon sign outside didn't just buzz, it shrieked. The lights inside pulsed once, twice, and then settled into a steady, aggressive violet hue. One of the hackers in the corner frowned. Victor, I'm seeing a spike on the local node. Someone's pinging the jammer. Ignore it, Victor snapped. Finish the asset transfer. From the shadows of the kitchen, a low, rhythmic sound emerged. It was the sound of keys, not the soft membrane taps of the corporate laptops, but the heavy, metallic clack-clack-clack of a high-end mechanical terminal. Gina walked out from behind the swinging doors. She wasn't the hunched, weary waitress anymore. She stood tall, her shoulders squared, her eyes burning with a terrifying cold clarity. In her arms, she cradled a rugged black box terminal, its screen scrolling with lines of emerald green code that moved faster than the human eye could track. A single Ethernet cable trailed behind her, snaking back into the kitchen's hardline. Who the hell are you? Victor demanded, half rising from his seat. Get back in the kitchen, girl. Gina didn't even look at him. Her fingers were a blur, a frantic, beautiful dance of destruction. Node 1 compromised, she whispered, her voice devoid of its soft waitress lilt. It was the voice of a general. Firewall, Aegis V0.4. I wrote the original kernel for that, Victor. Did you really think you could use my own child against me? What is she talking about? Victor barked at his lead hacker. Shut her down. I can't. The man stammered, his face turning pale. She's not just attacking us. She's ghosting the entire network. My screen is frozen. All of our screens are frozen. One by one, the 30 laptops in the diner began to emit a high-pitched whine. The corporate raiders scrambled, frantically hitting keys. But their displays had been replaced by a single, pulsing image, a white lily, the insignia of the whistleblower team. Gina had lost 3 years ago. Gina stopped walking 6 feet from Victor. She looked at him then, and the sheer weight of her intellect seemed to pin him to his chair. "You're using a brute force script to bypass Carlo's biometric encryption," she said, her voice echoing in the silent diner. "It's amateur. You've left your routing tables wide open on the back end. I just hopped your signal booster, tunneled through your secure VPN, and I'm currently sitting inside your firm's main server in Zurich." "You're bluffing," Victor sneered, though sweat was beginning to bead on his forehead. "You're a waitress in a flytrap diner." "Am I?" Gina's fingers hit a final, resounding enter. Victor's silver tablet on the table chirped. A notification appeared. Then another. Then 100 more. "That," Gina said, "is the sound of your consensus collapsing. I just reversed the share dilution. I flagged every single one of your hostile accounts for immediate AML investigation by the IMF. And as for your evidence against Carlo..." She paused, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "I just replaced every file in your database with the raw data of your own illegal transactions from the 2024 Moscow heist. The feds aren't coming for Carlo, Victor. They're coming for you." The room erupted. The corporate sharks, realizing their own bank accounts were being drained in real time, panicked. Some tried to run for the door, only to find the electronic locks controlled by Gina refused to budge. Others began screaming at each other, their professional masks shattering into a jagged mess of fear. Carlo Caruso looked up at Gina. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and profound awe. He didn't see a waitress. He saw a goddess of the digital age, a woman who had just dismantled a multi-billion-dollar ambush with a piece of hardware and a vengeful mind. "Who are you?" Carlo asked, his voice trembling. Gina looked down at him, the violet light of the diner reflecting in her eyes. The adrenaline was fading, and for a moment the old exhaustion threatened to return. But then she saw the way he looked at her, not as a tool, not as a weapon, but as a person. "I'm the person who should have done this 3 years ago," she said softly. She turned back to Victor, who was staring at his dead tablet in horror. "The jammer is down. The police and the SEC have been pinged with your exact GPS coordinates. You have 5 minutes before this flytrap diner becomes a crime scene you can't buy your way out of." She shut her terminal with a heavy thud. The silence that followed was absolute. Carlo stood up. He walked toward her, ignoring the chaos of the raiders around them. He stopped just inches away, looking at her chapped hands, her stained apron, and then her brilliant, tired eyes. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers, hesitant to touch something so powerful, yet so fragile. "You saved me," he whispered. "Why?" "Because," Gina said, her voice cracking for the first time, "I'm tired of the bad guys winning." Carlo took her hand then. His grip was warm, steady, and filled with a silent promise. "They aren't winning tonight. And you aren't staying here another second." He turned to the room, his voice regaining its billionaire authority. "My security team is 3 minutes out. They will handle these scavengers." He looked back at Gina, his expression softening into something deeply sincere. "But you're coming with me. Not as an employee, not as a witness, but because I want to know the woman behind the code." Gina looked at the diner, the place that had been her prison and her sanctuary. She looked at the red rag on the counter and the smell of cheap coffee. Then she looked at Carlo, for the first time in 3 years. She didn't feel like a ghost. "Okay," she whispered as the sirens began to wail in the distance. Carlo led her out of the diner, his coat draped over her shoulders, shielding the invisible waitress from the cold morning air. As they stepped into a world that would never be the same again, the world outside, the diner was a blur of blue and red strobe lights. The harsh reality of the corporate world collapsing under the weight of Gina's digital counterstrike. But inside Carlo's private estate, nestled high above the city in a fortress of glass and silence, the air felt different. It was thin, expensive, and smelled of cedar and old books. Gina stood in the center of the vast living room, her worn sneakers looking like an insult to the hand-woven Persian rug beneath them. She still wore the stained waitress apron. She hadn't let him take it yet. It was her armor, the only thing that reminded her who she had been for the last 1,000 days. Carlo returned from the hallway, having traded his ruined suit for a soft cashmere sweater. He carried 2 glasses of amber liquid. He didn't hand her one immediately. He waited for her to acknowledge his presence. He moved with a quiet reverence as if he were sharing a room with a rare, wounded creature. "The lawyers are already calling," Carlo said softly, placing the glasses on a marble table. "Victor and his associates are being processed. The evidence you planted, or rather, uncovered, is so comprehensive that the DOJ is already freezing their firm's domestic assets. You didn't just save my company, Gina. You performed a lobotomy on a monster." Gina didn't look at the view of the city lights. She looked at her hands, which were finally starting to shake. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only the raw, jagged edges of her trauma. "I didn't do it for the DOJ," she whispered. "I did it because I saw Malik's face in yours. I saw a man who believed the world was fair, and I couldn't watch that belief get slaughtered again." Carlo walked closer, stopping just outside her personal space. "Tell me about them." "Your team." And for the first time in 3 years, the dam broke. Gina spoke. The words tumbled out like long-repressed ghosts. She told him about the safe house in Kandahar, the smell of the dusty heat, and the way her team had laughed over a game of cards just an hour before the servers turned red. She told him about the Aegis software, the cybersecurity project that was supposed to protect the innocent, but had been corrupted into a tool for mass surveillance and corporate blackmail. "I was the lead architect," she said, her voice trembling. "I found the back door. I thought if I told the right people, they'd fix it. But there were no right people. There was only the machine. They killed my friends to keep the secret. I survived because I was in the crawl space, clutching a thumb drive and praying to a god I didn't believe in to make me invisible." She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with tears she refused to let fall. "I've been a ghost ever since, Carlo. I thought if I stayed small, if I stayed tired, the world couldn't find me. But tonight, I felt alive again, and it terrified me." Carlo didn't offer a platitude. He didn't tell her it was okay. Instead, he sat on the edge of the sofa and looked at her with a depth of empathy that made her breath hitch. "I grew up with nothing, Gina," he said. "People see the towers and the billions, and they think I was born this way. But I built Caruso Tech because my father was ruined by a predatory loan that vanished from the digital record. I wanted to build a world where the data couldn't lie, where the little guy had a receipt that couldn't be deleted." He reached out, tentatively taking her hand. This time she didn't pull away. His skin was warm, a solid anchor in the storm of her memories. "We're more alike than you think. We both tried to build shields for a world that only wants swords. You hid in a diner. I hid behind a balance sheet. But tonight, the shields broke. And maybe that's a good thing." The moment of intimacy was shattered by a sharp, rhythmic pulsing from Gina's black box terminal on the coffee table. She lunged for it, her fingers flying across the keys. Her face went pale. "It's not over. What is it?" Carlo asked, instantly alert. "Victor." "He had a dead man's switch," Gina hissed, her eyes scanning the scrolling red text. "He knew he might get caught. He's initiated a scorched earth protocol from a remote server we didn't hit. It's not attacking your company anymore, Carlo. It's attacking the city's power grid and the municipal water filtration system, and it's all being routed through your personal credentials. He's framing me for a domestic terror attack." Carlo realized, the blood draining from his face. "If those systems go down under my name, no amount of legal genius can save me. I'll be the most hated man in the country by sunrise." "He's trying to force a suicide scenario," Gina said, her voice regaining its icy tactical edge. "He wants you to lose everything, not just your money, but your legacy. He wants you to be the villain in the story he's writing." The digital assault was massive. Hundreds of botnets were hammering the city's infrastructure, each one carrying a fragment of Carlo's encrypted signature. It was a masterpiece of malice. "Can you stop it?" Carlo asked. Gina looked at the screen, then at him. The task was monumental. It would require her to go fully loud, To burn the last of her anonymity and potentially alert every intelligence agency on the planet to her location. It was the end of her life as a ghost. "I can't do it alone," she said. "The encryption is too heavy for one terminal. I need the processing power of your main mainframe, but I need you to authorize the kernel bypass. I need to be inside your head, Carlo. I need your trust completely." Carlo didn't hesitate. He stepped behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. "My mind, my company, my life. It's all yours, Gina. Lead the way." For the next 4 hours, the mansion became a war room. They worked in a feverish, intimate dance. Gina directed the technical counteroffensive, her voice a constant stream of commands, while Carlo navigated the labyrinthine permissions of his empire. Opening doors that had never been opened, they were hunched over the screens, their bodies pressed close in the cold glow of the monitors. At one point, Gina's hand cramped, and Carlo reached over, gently massaging her fingers without her even having to ask. It wasn't a distraction. It was a synchronization. They were two brilliant minds finally finding a frequency that worked. "I've got the primary node," Gina shouted as the sun began to bleed over the horizon. "I'm intercepting the packets. I'm rerouting the attack into a honeypot server I set up in the diner's old cloud storage. Victor thinks he's hitting the grid, but he's actually uploading the confession of his own conspiracy into the FBI's main intake portal. Now, Gina." Carlo urged Dot with a final synchronized strike of their keys. The red text turned blue. The scorched earth protocol died with a digital whimper. The silence that followed was heavy. Gina slumped back against the chair, her eyes closing. She felt a hand on her cheek, soft, lingering. She opened her eyes to find Carlo leaning over her. The distance between them was gone. "We did it," he whispered. "We did," she breathed. "You're the most incredible woman I've ever met," Carlo said, his voice thick with an emotion that had nothing to do with code or companies. "And I'm never letting you go back to that diner." Gina didn't answer with words. She leaned forward, closing the final inch, and kissed him. It was a kiss born of trauma, triumph, and the terrifying realization that she didn't want to be invisible anymore. She wanted to be seen. Specifically, she wanted to be seen by him, but as they pulled apart, a single red notification blinked on the screen. Unknown source. Encryption detected. Location compromised. The world was still watching. And Viktor Kozlov, even from a jail cell, had one final card to play. The red blinking light on the terminal felt like a heartbeat, the final, desperate pulse of a dying monster. Viktor Kozlov's last play wasn't a digital virus. It was a beacon. By triggering the scorched earth protocol, he had forced Gina to use her signature coding patterns. A digital fingerprint that the global intelligence community had been hunting for 3 years. "They're coming, aren't they?" Carlo asked, his voice steady despite the chaos on the monitors. He didn't look at the screen. He looked only at Gina. "Federal agents, international cybercrime units. They all just got a ping," Gina whispered, her fingers hovering over the kill switch of her terminal. "I exposed myself to save the city. To save you. My invisibility is gone, Carlo. The ghost is finally in the light." Carlo didn't flinch. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, watching as 3 black SUVs began to wind their way up the private drive, their headlights cutting through the gray dawn. "Then we don't hide anymore," he said, turning back to her with a fierce, protective fire in his eyes. "We fight. But this time, we fight with the truth. Carlo, you don't understand. I'm a whistleblower with a classified drive that belongs to a dozen different governments. They won't just arrest me. They'll erase me." "Not if the world is watching," Carlo countered. He moved to his primary desk and hit a sequence on his own console. "I'm opening a global live stream. Every major news outlet, every social media platform, and every server in the Caruso network. Gina, give me the drive. Give me the truth about Aegis and what happened in Kandahar. We're going to give it to the people before the agents reach that front door." Gina hesitated for a single heartbeat. To release the data was to burn the world she once served. But then she looked at the stained waitress apron draped over a nearby chair. She thought of Malik. She thought of the 30 people in the diner who almost died for a billionaire's bank account. "Do it," she said, sliding the encrypted drive into the port. As the federal agents breached the perimeter of the estate. The screens in the room and millions of screens across the globe ignited. The Aegis files, the proof of corporate government collusion, and the evidence of Viktor Kozlov's orchestrated terror attack flooded the internet. It was a digital tidal wave that no agency could stop. The truth was out, and Gina Reyes was no longer a fugitive. She was a hero. The heavy oak doors of the study burst open. Agents in tactical gear flooded the room, weapons lowered but expressions grim. At the lead was a senior director Gina recognized from her old life. "Gina Reyes," the director started. "You are under the protection of the largest legal team in the Western Hemisphere," Carlo interrupted. Stepping in front of Gina, his hand firmly interlaced with hers. "And as you can see on the monitors behind me, she is also currently the most famous woman in the world. Anything that happens to her now happens in front of 5 billion witnesses." The director looked at the screens, seeing the viral spread of the truth. He looked at the billionaire standing as a shield for a waitress. He lowered his radio. "We have orders to secure the data, Mr. Caruso." "The data is already public," Gina said, stepping out from behind Carlo. Her voice was no longer the whisper of a ghost. It was the resonance of a survivor. "The only thing left to secure is justice." 3 months later, the reconstruction of the city's digital infrastructure was hailed as a miracle. But for Gina and Carlo, the real miracle was the silence. They stood on a stage in the heart of the city, the sun gleaming off the glass of the newly inaugurated Reyes Caruso Foundation building. It wasn't a tech company or a hedge fund. It was a sanctuary, a global center dedicated to protecting whistleblowers, providing legal and digital asylum to those who dared to speak the truth against the powerful. Gina wore a dress of deep emerald, her hair flowing free. The exhaustion of the diner finally replaced by a glowing, vibrant strength. Beside her, Carlo looked at her not as a titan of industry, but as a man who had found his soul's counterpart. "Today isn't just about a building," Carlo said into the microphones, his voice echoing across the crowded plaza. "It's about a promise that no one will ever have to hide in the shadows for doing what is right. That the invisible among us are actually our greatest strength." As the applause swelled, Carlo turned to Gina. He didn't wait for the cameras to turn away. He dropped to one knee right there on the stage. The world went silent as he pulled a ring from his pocket. Not a diamond, but a sapphire, the color of the deep, clear ocean set in a band of blackened aluminum, the same material as her first terminal. "Gina," he whispered, his voice caught in his throat. "You spent 3 years waiting for the world to end. You saved my life, my heart, and my faith in humanity. I don't want to just be your partner in business or your ally in war. I want to be the man who wakes up beside you every morning and reminds you that you are seen, you are loved, and you are home. Will you marry me?" Tears, real and happy, finally spilled down Gina's cheeks. She didn't look at the crowd or the cameras. She looked at the man who had seen the goddess beneath the apron. "Yes," she choked out, pulling him up into a fierce embrace. 1,000 times, yes. The kiss that followed was the ending of one story and the beginning of a legend. The billionaire and the whistleblower. The architect and the ghost dot. As they walked off the stage hand in hand, Gina looked back one last time. She thought of the diner, the smell of burnt coffee, and the long, cold nights of fear. Those things were gone now, replaced by a love that was as indestructible as the code she wrote. They hadn't just survived the ambush. They had built a world where the ambush could never happen again. The destiny shift was complete. From the ashes of silence, they had built a kingdom of truth. And for the first time in her life, Gina Reyes wasn't running. She was exactly where she was meant to be. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments with those who believe that destiny can change everything one day. Subscribe, because when destiny shifts, everything changes.